Hello, hello, rock stars. There we go. I was like, something doesn't look right. Here we are. Welcome. My name is Holly, a Knight of String and Story, and it is my job to guide you to quote with confidence. And tonight, I am so excited to dive into one of my very favorite presentations, the Tension Without Tension Band Camp. Tonight, we are going to hopefully remove a whole bunch of the roadblocks that may be between you and that dream of actually finishing your own quilts. So if you are here, please say hi in the chat. I see Juliet and Bonnie, Catherine and Elena, and many, many others. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Juliet and others, an extra special welcome to our rock stars in Canada. I know there are feelings right now, and I really appreciate you being here. And you are so welcome and so celebrated here amongst the quilting rock stars. So thank you. We have been a global community for as long as we have existed, and it's always really, really fun to see all the different places that folks join us from. Hello, Donna. Hello, Darcy. Hello, Elena in Simi Valley, California, and Anne in Washington. Is it, and I'm gonna mess that up. So it looks like a really fun city name to say, and I'm scared of messing it up. Marilyn in Minnesota and Swiss girl Heidi in Seattle. I love it. Oh, let me adjust this mat I'm standing on. There we go. That's a little bit better. Maureen in New Jersey. Y'all are all over. Susan in the Pacific Northwest. Linda in Charlotte. Hello, hello. Welcome. I'm thrilled to have all of you here. Now, listen, we have a ton of ground to cover, so I am going to dive right in. We will chit chat plenty as we proceed through these slides. Any of y'all who have attended any of my presentations before, you know I love to side quest. Marlon, thank you. I deeply appreciate you making sure that I know how to pronounce your name. And that's a great name. That's amazing. Connie in Hawaii, aloha. Sherry, Damaris, hello, hello. Oh, so good. All right. Welcome to Tension Without Tension and other tips for confidently finishing your projects. I am thrilled to go through all of this with you this evening. I always like to acknowledge I am presenting from the traditional lands of the Yuki and Cherokee peoples. And my lovely co-conspirator Havana is here in the photo. She is here over in the chair. I'm going to be silly and I'm going to turn this around so y'all can see her. Hang on. Y'all just need to see this because it's too good. Can you see Havana right over here in this chair? She opened one eye to look at me very shadily. She's like, why are you putting me on camera right now? I just finished messing around in this chair and I want to take a nap. We had a good playtime before we jumped on together. All right, back to the actual work at hand. I told you I would side quest. If you are joining me and have not had the opportunity to download this workbook, please pull out your phones and do it. I'm going to grab a link to drop in the chat as well, just in case you are watching this on your phone and therefore are going to have a really hard time scanning a QR code. This workbook is going to have, we call this our Quilt to Your First Project with Confidence workbook, and it is going to have a ton of the information that I talk about this evening. Hello, Michelle. In written form, so that when we wrap this up, and you go on your merry way, hopefully to practice finishing your own quilts. Whether you join me in the classes that I'm going to share about with you or not, this will be a really handy resource to have so that when you go, what did she say about tension? I don't remember. It's all in this wonderful downloadable resource. So you'll head to that URL that I copied into the chat or scan the QR code with your phone, drop your email in, and I'll deliver that directly to your inbox. You don't need it for our time together tonight. It's just to have a nice, easy resource later to be able to refer back to, because like I said, we have a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to talk really fast. I'm going to try not to talk too fast, but I am going to talk really fast so that we can get through everything. Okay. Today is a celebration of quilting your own projects. In this band camp, I'm going to talk through tension and some of the other common hangups I see when folks are ready to start quilting their own quilts. By the end of our time together, you're going to feel excited and prepared to take the next step to finish your quilt and learn how to continue on this journey with confidence. Now, I will be fully transparent. I really hope that by the end of our time together that you've enjoyed my teaching style, that you've enjoyed what you've learned, that you're excited to full dive into a free motion quilting journey or a ruler quilting journey, or maybe even both, and that you join me inside of my online academies. But whether or not either of the academies is the right next step for you, you're going to learn so much this evening. Hello, CK. I love it. Oh my gosh. I always find an extra little delight when folks are like right down the road from me tuning in. So I'm thrilled that you are here as well. All right. If you are new around here, let me introduce myself properly now that I've been a bit of a goober as we've gotten started. My name is Holly and Knight, and I have been teaching free motion quilting, ruler quilting, and other techniques since 2017. And I have watched thousands of quilters just like y'all grow in their skill and confidence to finish their own quilts through my blogs, workshops, and digital courses. I'm married to the hubster. His name is John. We've been married, y'all. We've been married, let's see, we got married in 2013. This will be 12 years in May. And I used to say, and we have two little boys. I am not allowed to say little anymore. They are 9 and 10. They're half grown, which is wild to me, and they are incredible. They helped me set up our booth for Original Sewing and Quilting Expo tonight. Like they had an early dismissal from school, and when I finished doing stuff here, we jumped in the car and they helped me set up the booth. What? It's amazing. You've already met Havana. Here she is, much more alive, alert, awake, enthusiastic than she is right now. We also have two cats, Moby and Felicia, and a 75-gallon fish tank because, we didn't have enough going on in our lives. If I am not here with y'all or here in the store or hanging out with these guys, then I am probably out on a run or riding my Peloton. Though sadly, I did not get into the New York Marathon lottery today, which was a disappointment. I'll be honest. Alas, I'm standing right now inside of String and Story on Main. This is our brick and mortar shop in downtown Duluth, Georgia. If you are here locally, we would be delighted to welcome you through our doors. We are open Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, but we also have an online store. So if you don't have a quilt shop near you or you haven't found one that you've fallen in love with yet, we would be delighted to be your local online quilt shop. Now, a bit of housekeeping. And CK already asked me about this, and I thought it was just the perfect question. You don't need to be prepared to sew anything tonight. This is an opportunity for you to make a cup of tea or pour another beverage of choice, curl up in your comfy pants, or maybe do a little bit of sewing and absorb everything that I am going to be teaching for you this evening. What I will ask from you is please be chatty in that chat box, in those comments. Ask all the questions. I remember when I was first learning how to finish my own projects and just learning how to quilt in general, I wasn't sure where were safe places to ask questions. I was very afraid of being teased or laughed at because something I had asked was too basic. And I just want you to know from the jump that this is the place to ask those questions that maybe make you a little nervous. Because if you don't know, you don't know. And I want to set you up for success from the foundation with these skills. So if I don't explain something clearly enough or you feel like I've kind of skipped over a step, please ask for clarification. Please ask questions. That's one of my favorite parts of our time together. And it's why it's important to me to do presentations like this live so we get to actually chit chat back and forth and sometimes shenanigan back and forth. So, feel free to be a little sassy in those comments as well. All right. The tone for this evening is simple. Action cures fear. And while at the end of our time together, I'm going to encourage you to take action, right? I'm going to invite you to join me in a course. I'm going to invite you to actually get some fabric under your sewing machine and put these skills into a very hands-on kind of use. The first kind of action that we're going to take to cure any fear, anxiety, hesitation, or uncertainty that we feel about finishing our own projects is going to be the action of being present, the action of learning this evening, and the action of asking those questions, okay? When we begin to move forward, forward is a pace, right? A lot of those anxieties and uncertainties are simply going to fall away. Now, we're going to do this evening in a few parts, all right? We're going to talk about all the things you need to do before you sit down at your sewing machine. We're going to talk about what happens when you sit down at your sewing machine, how to prepare your space and your body for a nice, healthy, pain-free experience. Then we're going to talk about those very first stitches when that needle begins to go up and down for the very first time. And then we're going to take a little step backwards to talk a little bit more about that mindset piece, right? Because you'll notice it crops up as we go along. We're going to kind of revisit that at the end. And then I'm going to share with you about Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy. Sound good? All right. Before you quilt, you need some stuff. And I would like to point out that this is probably not as long of a list as you might have thought it would be. I remember when I was first learning how to free motion quilt, I really expected a long list of supplies. And the more I dug around, I kept looking for someone to mention some really hard to acquire thing. And at the time, the thing that I was really unsure about was that free motion quilting foot. That was the hardest thing. The rest of these items, I was like, I think I have those, right? So you need your sewing machine. You're going to need a free motion quilting foot or a ruler foot. A free motion quilting foot tends to be thinner. It's round but thin, so it can glide over the fabric and move omnidirectionally. So in any direction, it's not going to engage with those feed dogs. It's not going to need the feed dogs, anything like that. A ruler foot is also round, but it has tall sides. So when you click that ruler up against it, it's a little bit like those fabulous spirographs from the 90s. And there are a couple of y'all here who are from Atlanta. So I will make this very specific reference. I have a very vivid memory of getting my spirograph set at Underground Atlanta back in like 1996, right? It was like the year of the Olympics. Everyone was trying to visit Atlanta. We had just lived here for a couple of years. And so everyone we knew was trying to come visit because Atlanta was the place to be, in my opinion, it still is, right? And I remember going to Underground Atlanta and seeing someone demo the spirograph and going home with a set. And I never quite got the hang of it the same way, but that concept and that visual really sticks with me of having those two objects move against each other. So for ruler quilting, we're going to need that nice tall-sided foot to go up against our nice tall ruler, okay? If you're doing ruler quilting, you'll of course also need quilting rulers. Then you need some basic things. You need your sewing machine needles. You're gonna need a fresh one. You're gonna need some good thread. I recommend practice sandwiches. So instead of jumping straight into your precious quilt that you're perhaps worried about messing up, let's just put some fat quarters together with some batting and give that a whirl first, right? I like quilting gloves in order to reduce hand tension and prevent any oils or dirt or snicky snack crumbs ending up on our project. And then finally, a paper and pen so that we can doodle and make a plan before we start stitching. Okay. Now let's dive a little bit more into some specifics around these items. Let's talk about your sewing machine. Wait, that's so cool that you went to Underground Atlanta when you visited Michelle. I wondered if you would get that reference. I don't know why, but you did. I love that. My spidey senses were tingling for you. The sewing machine that you have is the sewing machine that is perfect for learning free motion quilting or ruler quilting. Okay. Even if it is the $97 machine from Walmart. Okay. In my case, mine was the $97 machine from Walmart that was a hand me down, right? Because here's the deal. We have enough perceived barriers to entry to learning a new skill. It is very hard to be a beginner as a grown up, okay? There's enough perceived barriers to entry of having to track down a specific foot, make a decision about if a class is right for you, simply making the time to sit down and practice. I don't want your machine to be one more friction point. The odds are, I mean, I have encountered so few times where a machine was not capable of this. I've had folks graduate from my classes on treadle sewing machines, on Singer featherweights, on the $97 Kenmore. Heck, I taught this class on like a $300 sewing machine that I bought online. Okay. All the way up to the most expensive domestic machines and long arms that there are on the market. If you begin this process of quilting your own quilts, whether that's with free motion, ruler quilting, a custom combination of the two, you fall in love with it and you need someone to write you a permission slip to upgrade your machine, I will be first in line to sign that permission slip. But right now, let's use your tried and true, familiar, and well known machine to practice this new skill. Like I mentioned, the presser foot, a hopping foot is going to be perfect for free motion quilting. That's going to have those, that shorter side. But for ruler quilting, do make sure you have a taller foot. It's going to be round with nice tall sides. For needles, I literally reach for a size 16 universal needle. Okay. Again, I love Schmetz needles and they have some incredible options and some incredible specialty needles. And especially if you're working with very specific fabrics for garment sewing, that's going to be really, really relevant. Right. But again, right now, as you fall in love with custom quilting, you can finesse if you have a very particular needle that you love. Right now, you probably have a size 16 universal needle somewhere in your sewing room. Or if not, that's an easy thing to acquire. All right. For thread, I am an Aurifil girly through and through. What you need is a fine cotton thread. I like that Aurifil 50 weight. I find that a nice fine thread like that, it's a lot easier to get balanced stitches and to get your tension to look really beautiful. Okay. Susan says, I've been sewing on my 43-year-old Elna SP and I've just started learning to quilt. I'm having trouble finding a clear FMQ foot and a ruler foot. Susan, I don't remember if the Elna is high shank or low shank, but I do believe it is a universal shank. So we probably have a free motion quilting foot that would work for you. And if not, if we don't have it in stock, I'm looking over here like, do we have them in stock? If we don't have them in stock, we can get one for you. They're like $10. Okay, perfect. Yes, low shank. They're like $10. Where are you located? The ruler foot is going to be the harder one. My recommendation would be to reach out to your local Janome dealer because that's the same family. And they probably have a free motion quilting foot too if you want to just purchase one there rather than order one. Um, but I would reach out to your local Janome dealer. Okay, yes, Washington, and see what light they can shed on it. The other option, if that dealer is willing, is would be to like bring your machine in and see what foot they have and see if it fits, even if it's not technically made for that machine, right? Because it should be a low shank, standard shank, nothing funky. So there should be a generic option on the market. Yeah, great question, Susan. Love that. All right. Once we have gathered all of those supplies, we need to prepare those practice sandwiches. This is what I mentioned earlier of having something that is not our precious quilt to start stitching on. And this is literally, fabric batting fabric. I do recommend putting actual batting in the middle and not just a third layer of fabric or a piece of flannel or anything like that because of the tension adjustment factor. We need that. We need space between your two layers of fabric for the twist of your thread to go. But as far as fabric is concerned, this can be big box muslin. This can be the stuff that's buried in the back of your stash that, let's face it, is no longer you. Um, this could be, if your guild has, a swap table, something like that, and there's fabric that's kind of been sitting in that to share pile for a long time and it hasn't spoken to anyone, scoop that up and turn it into some practice sandwiches. All right. But we need to put those layers together. If you're working with something small that's like fat quarter size, you can treat this like a Sunday school felt board and just put those layers together and not do anything fancy. And the friction is going to hold it pretty darn well. But you get any bigger than that, and we're going to need to actually baste those layers or temporarily find a way to attach them together until our stitching can hold them together. If getting down on the floor in order to baste is the barrier for you, then I recommend using an aerosol spray based. I personally love the purple and white can spray and bond. It's the one that I find has the least odor and the least kind of stickiness as you're sewing with it. And I would base either up on a table or a countertop or on your design wall. Okay. There are videos for this on my blog. You can go do a little deep dive after this if this is, something you struggle with. If it's the chemicals in the aerosol spray base that bother you, inside that workbook I shared tonight is a recipe for homemade spray based. And it's basically diluted flour paste. You dilute it with alcohol so that it's going to evaporate quickly back out of your quilt. And that's going to basically glue those layers together and they're not going anywhere. This one's a little bit more time intensive, a little bit more labor intensive, and I do recommend doing it on the floor for most projects. But it's going to be very inexpensive and it's not going to have the chemicals or the risk of sticky overspray that an aerosol would have. Finally, you could think about something like fusible batting. Hobbs makes a really great fusible batting, and for anything that's smaller than about a 36 by 36, it works really great that you layer it up, you press those layers together, and it's sticky enough that it's not going to come apart as you're working on it, but it's not, stiff or overly tacky or anything like that. Okay. All right. What we have done so far is we have gathered our supplies. We have prepared everything, and let's assume, kind of for the sake of argument, that you've got everything sitting there on your sewing table. Now, if you are in the very beginning stages of learning how to do this, your next step is probably going to be kind of the posture and things like that that we're going to talk about in a minute. But I insert this little section about making a quilting plan here because when you are actually working on your own quilts, in between the gathering of your supplies and the basting of your quilt, and actually starting to stitch it, you need to decide what to quilt where. And we call that process making a quilting plan. A quilting plan is a roadmap. So no more worrying about what you're going to quilt where because you will have made all of those decisions on paper or digitally if you have a drawing app on a tablet before you begin to stitch. It's a safety net, right? Life. So we get started on a project and the dog needs to go out or the kids get home from school or the laundry needs to get rotated and then we get caught up in a conversation with our significant other, or we fall down some other life related rabbit hole or necessary task, right? Having this quilting plan means that you can step away and come back without having to think to yourself, What did I say I was gonna quilt in these sashings? Because I'm really not sure, right? You can just reference that drawing that you already made and pick up right where you left off. It's also a really fun way to experiment. I really believe that there's an infinite number of ways to quilt every quilt. And especially as you get further into this custom quilting journey, sometimes making that decision is really hard. And you can try out different possibilities on paper or digitally first and kind of scratch that itch of getting to try a bunch of different things before picking your favorite and actually honing in on it. All right. Questions about this kind of initial preparatory step of gathering all the supplies. Any other supply questions? These were good ones. Hello in Ottawa, France. I'm so glad you're here. All right. If you have them, type them in and I will interrupt myself to make sure that they get answered. All right. Let's talk about pain free quilting. So at this point, we have gathered all of our supplies. We've sat down at our machine and we're considering, that act of putting the quilt under the needle. Now, there's probably a decent number of you that have gotten this far and maybe even tried actually quilting your quilts. And one of the roadblocks that you may have encountered was a sore neck, sore back, sore shoulders, all of those kinds of things. Let's talk about how to avoid that. Now, ergonomic posture and a proper quilting setup are going to be absolutely vital to a pain free quilting experience. I learned this lesson the hard way. Okay. When I first started quilting, especially long arming, for whatever reason, I know why. I started quilting on my domestic. Then I added in long arm quilting, and I was kind of learning how to custom quilt on both machines at the same time. And so it happened to show up in my long arming first rather than my quilting on the domestic. But when I first started long arming, I had no idea about body ergonomics. Okay. And I was spending a lot of time. Let me pull this down so y'all can actually see me. If this is my long arm, I had my handle here and I wanted to see what I was doing. And I know y'all can't see how thick these glasses are, but y'all, I'm like a -9 plus in both eyes. It's not great. All right. I don't have very good eyesight. So I've got my hand on my long arm handle and I'm bent over like this so that I can see what the heck I'm doing long arming. Now, it turns out that that's really ungood for your shoulder. And I started having a lot of shoulder issues, a lot of, kind of a feeling of like grinding and soreness and tightness. The shoulder was hiked up all the time. It was really terrible. So I went to the chiropractor, and my childhood chiropractor was in the process of um, selling the practice to a new guy, Dr. Mario, who is fabulous. And he takes a look at my shoulder and he goes, I have this funny question for you. I'm like, fire away, doc. Like, I'm an open book. He goes, play rugby on the weekend. Now, I know that y'all don't have a great point of reference for my size when I'm the only one on the screen. Um, I would get smashed to jelly if I played rugby on the weekend. Okay. My friend Courtney plays rugby on the weekend, and her shoulders are so wide that if I stand behind her, you can't see me. Like I could literally stand behind Courtney and win at hide and seek. Okay. So I chuckled and was like, no, why? And he proceeds to tell me that basically what's going on with my shoulder is something that he's really only seen as a sports injury. So, if you disregard what I'm about to say, you too could have rugby shoulder, but I really don't recommend it. Let's find other ways that we can be twinsies, okay? It has since been resolved. It's awesome. And then more recently, I actually started lifting weights, and some of the lingering issues I was having in my elbows also kind of melted away. Awesome. So let me share with you about how I don't have these problems anymore. All right. Donna asked a fabulous question down in the chat. She said, "Do you use a Supreme slider or similar product?" No. In fact, much to the horror of some, I rarely even drop my feed dogs. I know. Sometimes I will turn the stitch length to 0 so they're not moving. But for the most part, on most of my machines, I don't bother. Now, the Supreme slider specifically, well, let me talk to the feed dogs for a second. The feed dogs, it's machine to machine, right? So on my Burnett B08, those are some very strong feed dogs. I put a special plate in place that is taller than the feed dogs so that they cannot engage while I am free motion quilting because there's not a way to drop them on that machine. On some of my other machines, I simply leave them up, and that is a hangover from a hang up, a lingering habit, whatever the word there is, from a machine that I had many moons ago that I felt like I actually had more tension issues if I dropped the feed dogs. So, what I always recommend when it comes to feed dogs is experiment with what works best with your machine. Does it work best to just leave well enough alone and not worry about stitch length or dropping the dogs? Does it work best to simply turn your stitch length to zero so they're not moving? Or does it work best to drop them and turn the stitch length to zero? Okay, experiment around with that. As far as the Supreme slider specifically, so if you're not familiar, Supreme slider is kind of like a baking sheet, like a cookie sheet, those like Teflon ones that goes over your feed dogs and makes it a little bit slicker of a surface for you to move the quilt around on. In theory, there is one side that is very slick for you to move the quilt on, and the other side that's supposed to kind of suction stick to the bed of the machine. The problem is that there's a lot of lint involved in free motion quilting. You've got the needle going up and down really, really quickly with thread moving through it. That's going to generate a lot of lint. You're physically moving the quilt against the bed of the machine. That generates a lot of lint. It's just dusty, okay? And what will happen over time is that dust will creep underneath your Supreme slider and it itself will begin to slide. And after the third time that I sewed my Supreme slider to the back of a quilt and had to unpick it, I said a lot of swear words and put it in the trash. All of that being said, I have quilting rock stars who are students of mine, who are colleagues of mine, who absolutely swear by their Supreme sliders. So if you already have one, I think you should try it and see if you like it. If you have not yet purchased one, personally, I wouldn't bother. I don't think it's worth the money. So there's my thoughts. Great question, Donna. All right, how we can avoid rugby shoulder and other issues. All right. There are three keys I want you to think about with healthy posture. The first is going to be table height. So you want your table or your long arm frame, if you're working on a frame, okay, to be right at the bottom of your rib cage. So again, I'm going to tilt this down a little bit, right at the bottom of your rib cage, okay, so that when you put your arms at a right angle, right where that elbow hits, that's where I want your quilting surface to be. This can get really tricky if you are at a table and you then are setting your sewing machine on top of a table. So if you like quilt in your dining room tables are tall so that, soup can go from the bowl to your face without dripping everywhere. We appreciate that design feature. But it means that when we put a sewing machine on top of it, all of a sudden we're quilting way up here, right? And this is going to hurt your elbows. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's going to hurt real bad. So we want to figure out a way to be more up and over our work. This can be with a lower table. This could be by putting our machine down in a table. This could be by having a really tall chair or literally sitting on the phone book and putting your presser foot up on a box. There are lots of options, but make sure that your quilting surface is landing at the bottom of your rib cage. Then I want you to think about a stacked body, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. All right. A minute ago, I was showing y'all that when I sustained my rugby injury, right, I was quilting like this, okay? I had my head way down and jutted out. My body's all funky. Now, here I'm kind of holding my back and a flat back, but let's be honest, I was like rounded over like this, okay? Nothing is in alignment. I need to be up, head, shoulders, knees, and toes stacked nice and tall. We don't want our chin jutting out. This is super bad for the back of your neck, okay? We don't want our shoulders curved over. We don't want to be hunched. We don't want to have that C spine, right? Like, what's the easiest way for y'all to be able to see my torso? We're gonna pull these shirts in opposite directions, okay, right? So we want to be stacked tall, like this, right? Not collapsed like this, right? C is for cookie, C is for your back is going to hurt later, all right? So we want to make sure that we're sitting up over our pelvis and have our shoulders over those hips. If you've ever actually, seen a picture of the pelvis, right? We have what we think of as our hip bones, those tall wings at the side. But down underneath those, there's actually like two little kickstands. Those are called your ischial tuberosities. And on your body, y'all didn't know you were getting anatomy and physiology tonight, right? You've got your bum. This is the meat of your bum, your glutes. Those ischial tuberosities are actually up under, kind of more in between your legs, so that when you sit, you can literally sit up on them. And then your bum is behind you, right? This is when a young child comes and runs and jumps on your lap and you go, oh my gosh, you have a bony butt. That's because they landed right on those little kickstands, okay? We want to sit on those and be up in a nice tall position when we are working. Then you want that nice gentle right angle down through your leg and your ankle. Or if you are standing at the long arm, keep that nice tall posture. In order to be able to maintain this tall posture and still see what you're doing, you're going to need some really good light. So make sure you have nice bright light bulbs if you have overhead lighting in your space. Personally, I love having a good task light. I'm actually using it right now to put a little extra light on my face. I love the Daylight Slimline. So it is just a light bar that comes right over the top of my sewing machine and can shine down on my work and makes it a lot easier to see what I'm doing without having to hunch really, really close. Even though, as I have previously mentioned, I have heinous eyesight. Okay. So please, for the love of Pete, sit like a rock star, not like a goblin. All right. I am all for goblin mode in many contexts. This is not one of them. I'm in pain looking at this picture. But this is so often what we do. The other really important thing to think about when it comes to maintaining this really tall posture that we're talking about is recognizing that most of us don't maintain this posture day in and day out, right? We tend to be a little slouchy when we sit. Rather than having our bum behind us in the chair, we tend to sit back on it and sit on our tailbone instead of sitting on our pelvis. And those habits mean that all of the muscles that we need to use to hold our bodies upright maybe aren't quite as strong as they need to be. So, especially when you're first getting started quilting, please don't be afraid of working in very short bursts of time, right? I talk a lot about how, especially if I'm teaching in person and I'm showing how to mess around with a quilt underneath the machine, that one of the lies that social media can tell is that we as professional quilters, whatever the heck that means, right? Those of us who create content about quilting for the internet, that we never pause and reposition stuff. And we all do. We do it all the time, but that part's not interesting. So it gets cut out of the videos, right? The other miscommunication, deceit, if you will, that often happens on social media is a lot of quilting will get shown in a single video that may not have all been quilted in a single setting, right? Or a single session, especially if I'm quilting on a sit down machine, a domestic machine. I'm going to be working in 15, 20, maybe 30-minute increments. And then I'm going to get up and do something else because by that point, my core is going to be tired and I'm going to need to take a break so that I don't start slouching and injure myself. Okay. Remember, we want to use the largest possible muscle groups for all tasks. Sitting up over our work this way means that we're using big muscles like our triceps and our delts to move those quilts around underneath our machine, rather than if we're up here and we're moving a quilt around, we're using all the tiny little things in all our joints. And if you already have any kind of joint issues, that's going to irritate them very quickly and cause you a lot of pain. And if you are in pain, then your body will associate free motion quilting, ruler quilting, finishing your own quilts with that rather than with the joy, contentment, excitement that I want you to feel. Okay. This is a low key workout. Please make sure you are stretching and hydrating and all those good things. All right. Any questions about that? That is like my personal soapbox that I feel very passionately about. Um, because it has, affected so many of us. And I want to make sure that we have good habits as we are beginning our quilting journeys. All right. Oh, I will add one more note because I was reminded about this by an occupational therapist at QuiltCon. The other advantage of getting up periodically and going to do something else is that it's changing your range of vision. So when we're quilting, 12, maybe 18 inches away from our faces. When we get up and walk around, we're looking further away, and that's really important for eye rest as well. Charlene, do I have a favorite quilting chair? Oh, say less. You have experienced this chair, CK. I'm literally going to cradle it like a baby. This is my favorite quilting chair. Hang on, I got to make this bigger. I feel very passionately about this chair. There are links to this chair on my website. This is the Aero hydraulic sewing chair. I personally think they should rename it as the best quilting chair TM. It has this fabulous padding on it that makes it super comfy to sit in. It's height adjustable. Y'all also didn't know you were going to see me manhandle a chair right now. It's height adjustable and it goes very high and very low, which makes it a lot easier to get in the right position. This lumbar support hits perfectly for maintaining good posture. And as an added bonus, there is a secret compartment where you can put your snacks. So there you go. This is my favorite. It is available through Arrow Sewing. I have an affiliate link. I have like 11 of them and it's not enough. I am equally passionate about the share as I am about the light that I'm using. I just can't scoop the light up right now and show it to you. Great question. What I like about this one too, because I used one of the saddle stools for a really long time, and I still really like it. The problem with the saddle stool is there's no backrest, so I feel like my core gets tired a lot more quickly when I'm sitting on it, whereas having that little bit of extra support from the back of this chair is perfect. Listen, we all need a place to hide the snacks. The only downside to this chair is that there's not a lock on that secret compartment. I wish there was like a combination lock on it, not gonna lie. Um, I just feel like that would be cool. It's a weird feature that would make me really happy. I could literally lock up the snacks, you know? Okay. We have set up our space, we have set up our bodies. Let's actually take our first stitches. All right. We're going to talk briefly about choosing thread, cleaning your machine, because that is a key to having good tension. And then we're going to get to the actual question y'all all asked to come here this evening. How the heck does tension work and how do I make it pretty? Okay. Choosing thread. I love the process of choosing thread. We've already talked about my deep and passionate relationship with Ortho 50 weight, though admittedly this photo features Ortho 40 weight, which is probably my second favorite, but there's a decent gap. 50 weight is my favorite, okay? And when I'm choosing thread, I pick out a whole bunch of spools. I'm very, of course, fortunate that I've been using this thread for a long time, so I have a bunch of it. But I follow a couple of interesting principles. So this particular photo, I was taking a photo with these three threads because they were coming together in a collection. But if I were figuring out how I want to quilt this quilt, just generically speaking, I would have picked these three kind of mauvey colors that match that length. I would have also pulled out an orange because that's the background. I would have pulled out the green from the eyes, the purple from the shadow, and then probably a few other funky colors just to see how they looked, right? And I always do exactly what's pictured here, and I unspool the thread across the quilt because it's a little bit like the opposite of paint chips, that when you look at a paint chip, you always have to remember it's going to look darker on the wall when there's this much of it instead of this much of it, right? Thread is the inverse. So it looks really dark and intense when it's on the spool, but when you unspool it and you just have that one fine piece, you can really see what your stitching is going to look like. So I always pick some neutrals, some funky colors, some colors from the quilt, unspool them across the quilt, and you'll know which one's your favorite. There's not a right or wrong answer. I can't believe I'm just now having the opportunity to say this. For so many things with quilting, there's not a right or wrong answer. There's what works for you, right? And I'm going to share what works for me. And when I know other tips that I know work for the rock stars, I'm going to share those with you as well. And you get to experiment and try stuff and see what brings you joy and see what works, right? And it's the same thing when we're choosing our thread. There's not a right or wrong answer about which thread you should use on a project. You should use the one that you either just plain like the best or that straight up sparks joy. Okay. Cleaning your machine. If you don't remember, I know I told you you didn't need to be near your sewing machine tonight, but if you don't remember the last time that you cleaned your sewing machine, whether you do that while we're talking right now, or maybe you do it tomorrow, it's time. It's time. Okay. When we enter into our conversation about tension in just a moment, we're going to talk about getting a game of tug of war balanced between your top thread and your bobbin thread. But the other thing to think about is that that game cannot be balanced if there's lint or other debris in the way. And it's amazing how many tension issues are caused by really simple things like there's lint in the bobbin. The machine is threaded funky. The thread just didn't land in the thread path correctly, or you accidentally put the bobbin in upside down, or whatever. A dull needle, right? Really simple, preventable things that can cause you heartbreak and headache when it comes time to adjust your tension. So please, please, please make sure that you keep your machine very clean. Reference your manual to know when, like how often and how much and where to oil it. and make sure you're changing out that needle regularly, right? If you are a regular sewist, like if you are in your sewing room more days than not, change your needle every week, okay? If you don't sew that regularly, once or twice a month will probably do the trick unless you're having issues for some reason, okay? And then changing the needle is always one of the very first things that I do because a dull needle is going to catch funny on the fabric, it's going to catch funny with your thread, and it can cause a mess of issues. Now, let's talk about tension and how this tension thing works. I'm talking tonight specifically about adjusting your top tension. So, the thread that is coming off of your spool down to your needle and adjusting that in order to get balance with your bobbin thread. Some of you, if you are on a machine like this, the Burnett VO8, if you have a long arm, if you have an industrial Juki, and you have a machine that has a metal bobbin case, you also have the option to adjust your bobbin tension. If that's you and you're curious about that, you can head over to my blog, search TOWA Gauge, TOWAGAUGE at stringandstory.com. And I have a whole blog about how to use one of those to test and adjust your bobbin tension. Okay. But for most of us, we're probably on computerized machines. We probably have a drop in plastic bobbin, and that's going to be beyond the scope of what we need to know. Okay. Now, when we get started, we have just cleaned and oiled and threaded our machine, and everything is beautiful. Aww. And it's time to see how those stitches look. Now, that top thread comes off the spool down through all the tension things, including through the tension discs. All right, those tension discs, if you are on a machine like this, they're right on the front. They look like little symbols. If you're on a more modern computerized machine, they're probably behind the plastic cover. And the part where you go down and back up and down again is where you're flossing your thread into your tension disc. Okay, there's a little pair of symbols back behind that cover with a spring that is putting resistance on your thread. All right, and then this thread goes down to your needle. Down in your bobbin, you have, of course, your bobbin thread that's going to come up through the needle plate. When we're talking about tension, we're talking about the resistance that we are putting on, that we're mechanically putting on that thread to control how quickly it comes off the spool and how quickly it feeds through the needle. Okay. And we want this to be an evenly matched game of tug of war so that when that needle comes down and it brings the top thread with it, it needs to create a loop, but not too big of a loop that can go around your bobbin casing. And your bobbin casing, which was the part we were looking at here, right? That little gray piece that's sitting off to the side, it clicks twice, right? And a piece called the hook catches that top thread, wraps it around the bobbin thread, and then the needle goes back up. The feed dogs move forward, the needle comes down and again, and it repeats. And so with those two punctures through your fabric, it creates one stitch. All right. We want that twist I mentioned where the needle thread gets wrapped around your bobbin thread. We want that twist to land right inside your batting. All right. So that we get a clearly defined start and stop to each stitch on both the top and the bottom of the quilt. So the top thread, the spool thread is showing up on the top of your project, the bobbin thread is showing up on the back. Does that make sense? That's the mechanics of it when all goes well. Then we're going to talk about how to troubleshoot it because sometimes it goes wrong. If you've got questions, fire off in the chat. All right. Here are the things you need to know, right? One, as we discuss in just 5 seconds, when and how to adjust your tension. Please always, always, always lift your presser foot before you make any adjustments to your tension. That lifting of the presser foot releases those symbols we were talking about. So the thread can get all the way in there and the little screw that's adjusting how much tension is being put on those tension discs can actually engage and move and do the thing it needs to do so that when you lower the foot back down and those symbols come back together, it's at a new tension. All right. So always lift your presser foot to adjust and lower it back down to stitch. Even if you're in the middle of quilting and you're making a little tweak, just stop with your needle down, raise your foot up, make your adjustments, and then put it back down. All right. So what do we do if that game of tug of war is uneven, and how do we know which way to adjust it? The most common issue is you get eyelashes on the back of the quilt, okay? It looks scraggly, it looks messy, it looks bird nesty. You might actually have loops for each stitch. and you might see your bobbin thread kind of floating through them. That means that your top tension is too loose. All right. It means that when the needle is coming down, too much thread is coming off of that spool and pooling down inside your bobbin race. So when that bobbin clicks and then goes back up, there's extra thread down there that can't make a crisp and complete stitch. It's not getting drawn all the way back up when the needle raises again, okay, and then moves forward. So you're left with extra thread showing up on the back. What you need to do to solve this is you need to tighten your top tension. So if you're on a mechanical machine, you're going to turn the knob righty-tighty. All right. Some machines, you're going to turn it just a little bit. Some machines, like the B08, if you have the Burnett B08, you're going to turn that knob like you mean it. All right. You're going to say it with your chest and you're going to turn it a good bit because it takes a bigger turn to tweak it. My handy quilter, I'm like tick, 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 like tiny little twists, right? If you're on a long arm, by the way, like a handy quilter, remember that righty tighty, if you're standing at the end of the machine, is turning it away from you. Okay. If you are on a computerized machine, this is going to be moving towards a higher number, right? So more tension, a bigger number in order to have more resistance on that thread so that there's less thread looping happening on the back of your quilt. All right. Now, how do we know if our top tension is too tight? We're probably going to get thread breaks. Like reality, you're going to go to start stitching and your top thread is probably going to break and you're not going to know why. Okay. You can also technically get eyelashes on the top of your quilt. If you've got, thread really coming out of that bobbin easily and it's all getting pulled through to the top. Knots. I was like, there's one more thing that I'm missing. You may also notice this if you're doing swirls where you come into the point and go back out. Maybe your tension looked totally fine just a minute ago, but now you've got a little knot. It's just not quite a crisp, clear start and stop. It's a little blurry. All right. And in that instance, you're going to go lefty loosey, a lower number. All right. Tension is part science and part art. It is kind of like tuning a musical instrument that each machine is going to be a little different. Some machines, I swear, are picky as all get out. That I have a few machines that I can set them on one day with such and such thread and such project, and I'm going to need my tension to be in this place. And if the barometric pressure is different the next day, I'm going to have to adjust it again. I don't know if that's woo woo. I don't know if it's science. All I know is that every machine's a little bit different. You're going to get to know your machine. And my encouragement for you as you start to adjust your tension as you are finishing your own quilts is to let close enough be good enough, right? As you are on those early practice sandwiches, your tension may not be perfect, but you can be continually finessing as you are practicing your motifs. All right. Especially in the early parts of your journey, once you have done some fiddling around with tension on a practice sandwich, if you're going to be jumping onto a quilt, a real project, right? Keep that practice sandwich under the needle a little bit longer and actually stitch out some of the motifs you're planning to use on your project. It'll help you double check that tension even more, but it'll also just help work out some of the jitters so that you feel really ready and relaxed when it's time to start stitching on your project. I mentioned that things like a dull needle can cause issues like thread breaks that can, then make it frustrating if you're trying to adjust your tension. The other thing that can cause thread breaks is if you're nervous because your movements won't be smooth. And if you're moving that project kind of herky jerky, it'll cause thread breaks. And that just leads to more frustration and more anxiety, right? So take some time to kind of work the kinks out on a practice sandwich so you feel ready and relaxed just to start quilting on your actual project. Any questions about this? About thread, cleaning the machine, all the things that go around tension and how tension works? Dance break. By the way, if you've been sitting this whole time, it's been like 50 minutes. Do me a favor, stand up, arms up, and just kind of bend to each side for a minute. Make sure you take a sip of water, right? Push those hands down towards the ground, stretch out those shoulders. We want to be careful not to be sitting in one position for too long, whether we're quilting or doing anything else. All right. One last section, and then I have a wonderful, special, hopefully exciting invite for each of you. All right. Let's return to that mindset. I've made some references along the way to this, but I want to sit on it for just a moment because I think while all of this information is wonderful and helpful, It is often your IMG that is the actual roadblock to why you have not started finishing your own projects. Now, your IMG is your inner mean grump. You might have heard this called your inner critic, something like that. Uh, I like to think of it as inner mean grump because it's just that discouraging voice that lives in the back of your head. Now, it's an important voice. All right. It's an important voice because the inner mean grump is rooted in your brain stem, and that's the part of your brain that is in charge of making sure you stay alive. It's the part of you that says, that stove is hot, don't touch it, you'll get burned. It's the part of your brain that says, that's a hungry bear, we need a plan to get out of here. It's the part of your brain that says, that's a car coming, I'm not going to step out into traffic. Okay, right? This is self-preservation part of our brain. This is a really good thing. The problem is that your inner mean grump is a little too good at its job. It can't tell the difference between the hot stove, the oncoming car, the hungry bear, and any other new experience, which can lead to anxiety if you are wanting to become a free motion quilter, a ruler quilter, or learn any other skill as a grown up. Because learning new skills as a grown up is way harder for our brains. And not because we have difficulty learning them, because we have difficulty being a beginner. Okay. So I would like to encourage you to, hit your IMG over the head with a bolt of fabric and shove it in the trunk of the car. But sometimes it's easier said than done, right? So, what are some tactics that we can use? What are some coping skills, right? To use our therapy talk, what are some coping skills for calming that inner mean grump and reassuring it? Thank you so much. I know you're trying to keep me alive. This is not a hungry bear. I'm just trying something new. Okay, it's just fabric. It's going to be all right. The first is information. We did a lot of this together today, right? If you had anxiety about any of those steps of starting to finish your own projects, hopefully you have a lot less anxiety right now, right? You've got a much better concept of the supplies you need, how to set up your space, how to get that tension adjusted so you can actually get started. That allows you to say to that inner mean grump, I may not know all the things yet, but I know enough things to try. Okay. Sometimes that doesn't work. So sometimes we have to just give ourselves a pep talk. We have to remind ourselves of all the things we've learned before. One of my favorite comparisons is to say that if you can write your name, then you can learn how to free motion quilt. Because just like writing, free motion quilting is a series of repetitive shapes. Okay, we have a wiggly line, we have a loop, we have a swirl, we have a circle, we have a teardrop. And that's kind of it, honestly. Like that's free motion quilting. And then you mix and match those, right? You learn how to quilt a paisley, which is that teardrop shape. Then you know how to quilt a feather because a feather is just paisleys that lined up for recess. Okay. So sometimes we have to tell ourselves, you know what? I learned how to write, I learned how to read, I learned how to walk and talk and drive a car. And all of those things are way more like life or death in many ways than quilting. I'm gonna figure this out. It's gonna be okay. But if the information tactic doesn't work and the personal pep talk doesn't work, this is where a situation like what we're being able to do right now of being in community with one another virtually or in person can become really powerful because sometimes you just need someone else to say, no, you're doing an awesome job, right? It's so easy as a kiddo to believe that we are limitless. As grown-ups, we are often our worst limitation. We are the quickest to put walls around ourselves. All right. And sometimes you just need a friend to say, you're really doing a great job. I know it's hard for you to see right now, but I need you to keep going. All right. Michelle says, one of my favorite quilts I made, I look at and I'm stunned by my quilting. It was my third quilt and I didn't know how complicated my quilting plan was, but I just did it. Yes. Yes. I did an interview today for a podcast that will be out in May. And the interviewer, asked me something along the lines of like, how did you get started free motion quilting? And I literally was like, I was too naive to know I was supposed to be scared of it. Like I didn't have quilting friends. I wasn't in a quilting community. I saw some pictures of free motion quilting and thought it looked cool, so I tried it. Like, right? And so sometimes it's that we just have to jump in, which brings me to this very important. Well, I have one more point before this. I quoted at the beginning of our time together Angelia Trinidad, who said, Action cures fear, right? And you've already taken 54 minutes of action by being here. You are an entire rock star. Angel Trinidad had another really important quote that fits perfectly with what Cheryl just dropped in the chat of it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to start. I heard Marianne Fonz on an interview last week while we were at QuiltCon, and she said, for your first three, 1, 2, 3 quilts, you're a beginner. From that point forward, you are an intermediate quilter forever because we're always just learning and growing. And this isn't about perfection, it's about progress, right? So getting started and with every quilt asking, what can I do this time? What are my possibilities, right? And Michelle, I love that you share this story of a quilt that you worked on some time ago that you look back now and you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. And it's great one because A, you did it, but also the next time you want to make a complicated quilting plan, you have proof that you can make it real because you've already done it, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to start. And practice is going to make the progress that we all want to see. So, no matter what your inner mean grump says, and listen, I'm passionate about this. This is my other personal soapbox because I have a very, very, very mean inner mean grump. If you ever have the chance to ask my husband about it, it'll curl your toes, okay? But you can and will be a quilting rock star. I believe in you wholeheartedly. And even if your inner mean grump is loud right now and you're having trouble believing it, I will believe it for you until you create your own proof because you will. You've got this. All right. What is your quilting dream? I'm going to guess that if you took the time to register for and show up, excuse me, register for and show up a band camp like this, that there's something you're wanting to do. It might be that the flimsies are starting to pile up and the long armor is expensive. It might be that the flimsies are starting to pile up and the wait at the long armor is a long time. I know some of my long arm clients right now, bless them, it is a long lead time. Uh, it might be that there's a very special project that you want to work on. It might be that you're very aware of the actual cost of what it takes to make a quilt and you are wanting more joy units per project, right? You're wanting to spend more time with each project. What's that dream? If something specific has come to mind for you, drop it in the chat. I would really love to know. Because I hope that our time together thus far, whether we continue this journey from this point forward or not, I hope that you've gained some really practical information that nudges you further along the path to making that dream come true. All right. If you've enjoyed this time together and you would like to continue with me to make that dream come true, I would love to continue to be your guide as you become a quilting rock star. And I would love to do that inside Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy. These are the classes I promised to talk to you about at the beginning of our time together. Juliet says, I want to wrap myself in finished quilt. Yes, let me tell y'all. Okay, I will return to this in a moment. I make a ton of quilts here for the shop, right? And not very many of them actually make it like to my house. They live here and they rotate around on the walls depending on what we've got going on, right? Which means it's been a minute. I mean, like years question mark since I've made a quilt that I've gotten to snuggle under, like a new one, right? I have quilts at my house, but it's been a while since I have made a new one that I've gotten to snuggle under. And I took a couple of quilts home last week after QuiltCon. They had kind of completed their life here, and one of them is the blue and white water fabric Lanterns of Hope that I made last year. There is something so magical about that first time that you like pull it out of the dryer and you snuggle. I want that feeling for y'all so badly, so badly. CK says my 9-year-old granddaughter made her first quilt, and I know she can't afford to have it quilted, so I want to do it for her. Oh, that makes me so happy. Also, I want to see this quilt. Please bring it by. I want to gush over it. So let's talk about how these dreams can come true. Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy are comprehensive. This is the quilt I literally was just talking about. This quilt is on my bed right now, and it's so good. Is a proven method, and it is a comprehensive methodology for learning how to free motion and ruler quilt your projects so that you transform from a nervous beginner quilter to a confident intermediate quilter in just a few months. And I am so excited to watch you experience that transformation and those joy units of the quilting process and of pulling that quilt up under it and snuggling it. Bonnie says, I have a stack of charity quilts that my guild once quilted. This was one of the reasons that I got deep into free motion quilting is that I was working on charity projects. Absolutely. There's something special about infusing your love and care into a project as you take it all the way from fabric to binding, right? This is Maureen. Maureen took Free Motion Quilting Academy. She's actually since taken Ruler Quilting Academy as well. And she says, I loved everything about Free Motion Quilting Academy. At 69, I was a little doubtful that I could learn how to free motion quilt. But when I found Holly-Ann's intro to FMQ, I decided to try. Holly-Ann's teaching style and videos are fantastic. And although the course is 12 weeks long, there's no pressure to finish within that time period. Life sometimes gets in the way, and it's so very nice to have one less pressure. I love being able to go back to the course over and over again for a refresher of any of the motifs. Another wonderful part of this course is being able to post questions and be in contact with others who are taking it. There's so much encouragement within the group. Holly-Ann, thank you for this fantastic course. I hope one day I can pop into your shop and meet you in person. This will go down as one of my very best Christmas gifts my 6 children have given to me. And just a couple of years ago, they also gifted her RQA, which I just think is fabulous. And this is, by the way, all of these testimonials that I'm going to share with you, these amazing rock stars, the projects that they're holding up are their graduation projects. So we have actually the opportunity, if you want to graduate from these classes, and we celebrate you and you get to show off your skills in this really special way. So all of the color you're seeing on this quilt, she did with thread and did with free motion quilting. This is Gail. Gail says, I loved learning how to use rulers to make different shapes for backgrounds, fillers, and borders. I love Holly-Ann's realness in her teaching and her positive, encouraging attitude. So Free Motion Quilting Academy is an incredibly valuable course because we cover all the things. It includes 6 professionally recorded video units teaching you all the ins and outs of free motion quilting, starting with what we talked about tonight. Like what we talked about this evening is basically the introductory unit. And you actually get to see me doing all of these things in real time. And then we go all the way through 30 motifs and a bonus unit about quilting plans, which we kind of touched on just, this much this evening. I dive much deeper into that inside the course. There's also a fabulous 50+ page course workbook, access to our exclusive course community, as well as live Q&As with me. And you have lifetime access to this that once you sign up, this is exactly what Maureen was talking about, that you're welcome to go through with us on the actual schedule if that structure is helpful for you. But also once you purchase, you have lifetime access. So you can work through at your pace. If you've got a busy life, you've got a lot of things going on, you're just going to do a little bit here and a little bit there, that is totally okay. All right. Tuition for Free Motion Quilting Academy is $327. All right. We do have a payment plan available. By the way, I'm dropping the links just to the regular full pay right now. But if a 3-pay payment plan is helpful for you, please reach out to us at hello@stringandstory.com and I can send you that link. All right. Enrollment is open till March 8th, so through Saturday, and then new student orientation starts next week. Ruler Quilting Academy is much more geometric, right? Free motion is much more organic. Ruler Quilting Academy is much more geometric, and it packs the same amazing punch of content. Lifetime access to the lessons teaching you all of the things you need to know. So 6 video units full of tips, tricks, and motifs, starting with your setup, how to safely handle a ruler and all of those good things, all the way through very complicated border motifs and some ideas for putting ruler quilting and free motion quilting together. It also includes a workbook. It also includes our course community, and it also includes those live Q&As. So we collect questions on Tuesdays. I'm live on Wednesday mornings. I say that we collect questions on Tuesdays because I know not everybody can actually join live, right? But there's always a replay, and that way you always have the opportunity to ask your questions and get an answer from me, okay? This course also, this is true of both courses, but it's particularly relevant for Ruler Quilting Academy because we have not yet professionally filmed this course. I filmed this course. We've had hundreds of students take it with wild success. It is our hope to professionally film it in the future. And when we do that, you will get a free update. Okay. So you'll get the next version as well. Tuition for this course is $247. Same thing. Signups are open until Saturday, and new student orientation starts next week. Or you can enroll in both and save $100, right? So, Free Motion Quilting Academy is a 12-week comprehensive online course to teach you all the skills you need to become a confident intermediate free motion quilting rock star. Ruler Quilting Academy is a 9-week online course to teach you all the basics of handling rulers, an amazing toolbox of over 24 ruler quilting motifs. Individually, they build your skills and confidence to finish your own quilts. Together, these courses will transform you to be able to custom quilt all of your projects for some truly spectacular outcomes. So if you've been sitting here going, I don't know which one I want to do both, great news, you can buy both and save. All right. The savings is if you do full pay for both. And like I mentioned, we do individually have 3 pay options for both of these courses as well. So you can always send us an email and we will get that link over to you. We want to make sure these are as accessible as possible. Now, how do the community groups work? The units, the lessons, right, are in the main portion of Kajabi. So think of that as like going to class. Those lessons are pre recorded. So they drip out week by week and you can watch them at your leisure at the time zone that works for you. I know that we have at least 4 time zones represented here this evening, right? Also within Kajabi, we have what's called the community. Think of this like study hall, okay? So study hall is where you can share pictures, you can ask questions, you can chit chat with each other, you can discover that there's someone in class that lives down the road from you and you want to go have coffee. True story, okay? And just generally have a great time. And then I'm live for those weekly Q&As because I never want you to feel stuck. That was one of my frustrations when I was a new quilter is there were amazing resources available online, but there wasn't a good way to ask for help. So I always want you to be able to have the opportunity of something like this where you can say, I have a question, please help. Can you help me troubleshoot this? And I can in near real time, right? Literally live if you're able to attend during the live Q&A, or if you ask that question ahead of time and catch the replay, within a day or two, okay? And those Q&As live in our vault, so you can always go back and watch them later. What does lifetime access mean? It means you're stuck with me. Mwahahaha. What that means is that you have the ability to work through these courses at the pace that is perfect for you without paying extra. It means that if you take the course all the way through and you graduate, but then something happens and you don't quilt for a while and you come back and you need a refresher, that you can pull those videos up and watch them again without paying extra. Okay. It means that, maybe you've been working your way through and you have some favorite motifs that you use all the time, but then you want to pull something special out of the hat, but you only sort of remember how to do that particular feather. You can go back and watch that video, even if it's years after the fact, without paying extra. Okay. This is Sandra. Sandra says, I love Holly Ann's enthusiastic support and teaching style, the supportive environment that is cultivated, and the permission to not be perfect. We are here for joy units, not just perfection. Listen, there are quilts where we want to be really precise, but those joy units come first. Okay. This is Megan. She said, I love the permission to play. Great videos show us how to do each motif, but with no firm requirement on how we had to use it in the final project. I really thought this would be difficult, but once I got going, it isn't that hard. Practice is fun. You give us the confidence to get past our fears and get started. I really enjoyed this class, possibly even more than the free motion quilting one. So, Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy allow you to learn how to do custom quilting on your projects from the privacy and comfort of your own home. I really love this because I teach these, not these exact classes, but I teach portions in person as well. And that can be really fun to have that focused time together, right? But it also means that if something goes wrong or you're having kind of an off day or you're tired, you may not get the most out of the class, right? What I love about being able to learn, for you to be able to learn at home, is you're on your machine in your space in your soft pants with no one over your shoulder, right? And if you get in a groove, you can just go. But if you hit some sort of roadblock and it's just kind of not working that day, you can just walk away and come back later. And you get to do what works for you day in and day out. Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy encourage you to start with what you have, the machine that you already have, just a couple of rulers, not too many fancy extras, to keep things as affordable and accessible as possible rather than urging you to go buy the most of everything. All right. Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy are ready when you are, regardless of geography or time zone, with on demand pre recorded video lessons. But even though we take that into account, we're not going to leave you hanging. You have ongoing access to me, so you never feel alone or stuck, and you can get near real-time help via those Q&A sessions. Plus, you get connected to each other. I named String and Story, of course, because it's fiber art, but also because each of us bring stories and experiences and different reasons why to the quilts that we make. And one of the things that's very special historically about quilting is that it is something that is done in a circle. It is something that is done together. It is something that, is often accompanied by much gabbing and snacks, right? And so we're able to do that virtually through our community, that can result in really fun friendships, but it also means that if you've got a question or you need some encouragement, you can jump into these communities and there's always someone online who can help. And I think that's really, really special. This is Francie Joe. I finally, after years of knowing Francie Joe virtually, I think Francie Joe was in the first Free Motion Quilting Academy cohort in like 2018. And I finally got to hug her in November up in Michigan. And she said, I went from being a beginner to an intermediate quilter during Free Motion Quilting Academy. Before I started, I could not make curved lines at all. Now I love making curvy motifs. The support and encouragement from Holly Ann and other rock stars is so helpful, worth every penny. And Elizabeth says, I love your videos. You explain things clearly. You are inspiring. And I love that you sometimes have a bobble, but you keep going, which means that I can too. Q&A sessions are fun and your enthusiasm is contagious. So Rockstars, just to review one more time, Free Motion Quilting Academy is all about those organic motifs. You get those pre-recorded videos, your workbook, access to the community, and live Q&As with me for one tuition payment of 327 US dollars. And enrollment is open through Saturday, March 8th. Ruler Quilting Academy is focused on geometric designs and using quilting rulers to make those shapes. Once again, you get pre-recorded videos, you get live Q&As with me, you get an awesome workbook, and you get a super cool community for one tuition payment of 247 US dollars. When you sign up for either, you get lifetime access. And if both have tickled your fancy, I would love to have you jump into both and learn those skills side by side and save $100 in tuition along the way. Like I said, we are going to be enrolling until the 8th, and then new student orientation starts next week. What questions can I answer for you? Do I have more slides? Is that the end of my slides? That might be the end. What questions can I answer for you? Thank you so much as y'all are typing questions, thoughts, whatever. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me this evening. This has been such a delight. I always love having the opportunity to teach this content. These are a lot of questions that we've all had as we started our quilting journey, and I consider it an absolute privilege to be able to come alongside you and hopefully remove some of those roadblocks so you feel more confident about those quilting dreams coming true. And I really hope that there has been some nugget or some tip or trick that even if the academies aren't the fit for you right now, that you can take and you can apply to your quilting journey. All right. Michelle says, best money you can invest in yourself. Come join the Rockstar community. Admittedly, Michelle is biased because she is a deeply invested member of the community, and that is my favorite thing. So, Michelle, thank you. I'm so glad that you were here. And I love getting to continue to hang out with you in courses and in Backstage Pass. Big fun. Donna says thank you. Susan says thank you. Thank you all so much. I love all of this. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope to see many of you inside of Free Motion Quilting Academy and Ruler Quilting Academy. And don't forget, signups are only open till the 8th. I'm going to say that 1 trillion times. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. If you're local, I hope I see you at OSQE this weekend. Otherwise, I'll see y'all online. Bye for now.